Now we're into this period following the Potsdam Conference of these rising tensions between the countries. The first thing to be aware of is Kennan's long telegram, called the Long Telegram because it's ridiculously long. It's about 10,000 words. It's more like a dissertation, from February of 1946. Kennan is an American living in the Soviet Union, and he sends back a report about what their beliefs, and he says this. Well, he's an American diplomat living in the Soviet Union. This is what he reports back to America. And he says, Stalin wants to see capitalism destroyed, but Stalin feels very, very threatened. So he's paranoid about capitalism and America's actions. However, what he does say is that the Soviet Union is not suicidal. So they need to be dealt with firmly, and that way they'll be forced to back down. What this leads to is the introduction of the Truman Doctrine. Remembering Truman is the president of America at this time. Doctrine means his belief. So this leads to the introduction of the Truman Doctrine, which is the policy of containment. It also means that what America is willing to do is use financial aid and or military intervention to stop communism spreading to other countries and stop communist expansion. So what's important there is America won't interfere. The Truman Doctrine means America won't interfere with what the communists and the Soviet Union already control, but they will try and stop any spreading of it. These tensions escalate, these suspicions escalate with Churchill's Iron Curtain speech on the 5th of March 1946. Now, whilst he's no longer the Prime Minister of Britain and he's not speaking on behalf of America, the speech he's giving takes place in America. So what he says here is interpreted as being America's point of view. Now, Churchill's Iron Curtain speech sours relations. As I say, it gives a speech in America about US and Soviet Union relations. In response to Soviet governments being established in Hungary, Poland and Romania and Bulgaria, which we'll look at in a moment, Churchill claims that the Soviet Union was a threat to freedom and world peace, and he talks about this Iron Curtain descending, as in like this wall of secrecy separating East and West of Europe. Because the speech was given in the US, it's believed Truman must have okayed it, and therefore Stalin interprets the Churchill speech as being America's beliefs as well. This increases tension and hostility between the two even further. Then what you see, as always, is the sort of retaliation from the Soviet Union, which is the Novikov telegram from September of 1946. He's a Russian diplomat in America, and he's going to do exactly what Kennan did, but the other way around. And what he says is this: the USA wants to use its massive military power to dominate the world, and that the American people, the population, would support going to war. So what he says is the Soviet Union need to develop protection for themselves through the buffer zone. In summary, they see America as the aggressor and believe they need to control these satellite states as a buffer zone for their own protection. The thing is, remembering, nobody wants to risk atomic war or nuclear war. It would be mad, mutually assured destruction. Now, this leads to, as we spoke about already, or what this contributes to even further, is Stalin forming the satellite states, a buffer zone. It becomes even more determined to establish this. Let's take a look at the dates. So, first off, this takes place before those events. This is the Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia. These are three of the satellite states, sometimes called the Baltic states. They were conquered by the Soviet Union in 1940, so during World War II, and they were treated as part of the Soviet Union. The next nation that fell into the satellite states was Poland in 1944. So in 1944, Poland staged a rebellion against German occupation. So during World War II, Poland rises up and tries to overthrow Nazi control itself. That's known as the Warsaw Uprising. And it would have been an example of if they had thrown Germany off themselves, it would have been liberation, self-determination. It wouldn't have been from the communists, would it? The Soviets had promised to support them. However, this is where they get proper sneaky. The Soviets encourage the people of Poland to rise up and overthrow the Nazis, and they say, yes, we'll help you. But when it comes to it, they don't. Now, the reason being, obviously, they want to free Poland themselves, because then they come as liberators and they believe that gives them the right to install a new government. So instead of helping, the Red Army, that's the Soviet Union and Russia's army, simply waits for the uprising to be crushed and then invades Poland themselves. And therefore what that means is they can put a pro-communist government in place. At first, this government includes some of the London Poles, that's the previously exiled pre-war government of Poland. However, after supposedly free elections in 1947, these London Poles were forced to flee or face imprisonment. Another satellite states, or rather other satellite states that get established, are Bulgaria and Romania. In 1944 and 1945, the Soviet Red Army took control of Bulgaria and Romania and eastern parts of Germany. As in Poland, there were free elections, in quotation marks, free, but in reality, voters were intimidated and all of the elections brought in communist government. What's an important point to state here is these countries during World War II, obviously, this is as the Red Army advances across Europe, forcing Hitler back. They're obviously entering into these countries and then so arriving as liberators, but then just not leaving and helping set up communist governments in those, I say helping, forcing communist governments into power in those countries. Next one, Czechoslovakia. From 1919 to 1938, so the interwar years, Czechoslovakia had been the only democracy in Eastern Europe. After World War II, a coalition government, that means like a few parties working together, led by Beneš, tried to restore the democracy that existed before World War II. However, Stalin sees this as a threat to the buffer zone he was trying to set up. Why? Well, because if they do it themselves, he doesn't have a right to control them. So he sees this potential pre-war democratic government being restored as a threat to his buffer zone. So what does he do? Well, very simply, he encourages the communists in Czechoslovakia to stage a coup, as in take power by force. So Stalin saw this democracy as a threat to the secure buffer zone he was trying to set up. So he supported, by the Soviet Union, communists staged a coup in February of 1948. Beneš and other non-communists were removed from power, and the pro-Soviet communist government was set up under the leadership of Klement Gottwald. I'd be trying to commit that name to memory because Czechoslovakia comes up later on in the course, doesn't it? So that's how Czechoslovakia falls under the communists, effectively a coup supported by the Soviet Union. Then we get Hungary. In Hungary, there were elections in 1945 and some communists were elected, but not enough to form a government. In the 1947 elections, however, voters were intimidated in a campaign supported by Moscow and a Communist Party government was elected. Wouldn't you believe it? As soon as intimidation starts getting involved, the communists get elected. By 1949, Hungary became a one-party communist state. So what you can see there, hopefully what I'm making clear is the top section are how tensions rose and the bottom section is how the satellite states were established.